Begin the current daf in this Eruvin Daf begin the second line down at the top of the Yomit, where we continue with the laws of Erev Tchumah. Our shiur corresponds to the Zifin Cheskel to any time Daf Achaim. You should everyone who's joining us for today's daf. Some of the days we're going to speak about in today's daf are we have machlekes in the Mishnah between the Chacham and the Eliezer when Yom Tov falls out either Friday Erev Shabbos or Sunday right after Shabbos. And the machlekes is, can one have separate Eruvin for the 2 days or in different directions? Essentially what it comes down to is the Shabbos and Yom Tov considered one Kedusha, and therefore you can only make one Erev for both days, or is it considered Shti Kedushas, 2 different sanctities, one Shabbos, one Yom Tov, and then you can make a separate Erev on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Some of the key terms and concepts are Hachana, preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos, and what we said before, Kedusha Acha Shti Kedushas. If you have 2 days Yom Tov, 2 days Yom Tov and Shabbos, are they considered one sanctity, and therefore you can only make one Erev, or Shti Kedushas, 2 sanctities. The concept we have in the previous stuff called Chamar Gamel, it's an expression of being strict in 2 opposite directions, which one, the camel is in front, and someone said one way, and the other one's in the back of you, and basically you're stuck somewhere in between. So we begin the current daf, Amches Amid Aleph, 2 lines down at the top of the Yom. So the Mishnah begins. He says, Yom Tov is Samach Shabbos. If you have a Yom Tov near Shabbos, now, whether Yom Tov is before Shabbos, whether on Friday, whether it's after Shabbos, on Sunday, the halacha is me'ar v'adam shnei Eruvin. A person can make 2 Eruvin. So let's say on the first day he wants to go one direction, another 2,000 amas. And the second day he wants to go actually another 2,000 amas in the other direction. So what he can do is he can make an Erev for one day on the east and one day on the west. Before Yom Tov starts, before Shabbos starts, he puts on 2 Eruvin, one for one place and one for another place. And he says like this. He says, Eruvin He says, my Erev on the east should acquire for me today, for tomorrow, meaning for the first day, whether that be Yom Tov or Shabbos. And my Erev in the west should acquire for me the Beinash Mashas of tomorrow, for the day after, for the second day. Again, whichever the second day is, whether it be Shabbos or Yom Tov. Now the reason for this is because Rabbi Eliezer holds Shabbos and Yom Tov is not like one long day. It's like 2 sanctities. Therefore, every single day you have a separate shvisa, a separate area that you're acquiring as your Shabbos residence. And each one, you could choose whichever direction you want to. The first Beinash Mashas is going to acquire for the first day, and not for the second day. The second Beinash Mashas will acquire for the next day. And therefore, you could go ahead and make it whichever way you want it to be. Now, on that says the Gemara, the same thing is in the reverse. Let's say Berisha L'Ma'ariv, let's say the first day I want to be in the west, B'Shem L'Mizrach, and the second day I want to be in the east. Or let's say a Ruba Berisha. Let's say only the first day Yom Tov, whether it be Shabbos or Yom Tov, I want to go 2,000 amas in one direction. But it's Sheni Kibneiri. The second day, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to leave my Tchum. I don't want to lose either direction. So I don't want 2,000 amas in one direction and then lose in the other direction. So in that one day, he says like this. He says, I want my Erev to acquire for me for tomorrow, for the first day, so I can go another 2,000 amas. But the second day, I want to be like people in my city. I don't want to Erev at all. Or if let's say he had to go the second day and not the first day. So then he says, Eruvin B'Sheni. I want my Erev to acquire for me the Beinash Mashas of tomorrow for the second day Yom Tov, Uberishin Kibneiri, and the first day like the people in my city. Again, I'm just calling second day Yom Tov. Really, we're talking about Shabbos and Yom Tov. One day Shabbos, one day Sunday, as a Yom Tov. And therefore, either the first day he wants to go somewhere, and the second day he wants to stay like a city, or the first day he wants to stay like a city, and the second day he could choose. Basically, according to Rabbi Eliezer, there are 2 different days, and therefore, whichever one you want it to be, it's going to be. Now, Chachamim, they disagree. They say no. Either you make an Erev to one direction for both days, or you don't make an Erev at all, even to one side, to be one of the days like the people in your city. You can't choose. It's got to be for both days together. Or let's say, or you make an Erev for 2 days, which Gemara is going to ask, wait a second, that's exactly what you're saying about one direction, the same thing as 2 days. Gemara is going to ask on the redundancy, or you don't make an Erev at all. So essentially what the Chama is saying, that you can't go ahead and separate the 2 days. Now, so that says the Mishnah, so Ketzi Yatsa. According to the Chum, what should you do? Because let's say you want to go for the 2 days, it's one sanctity, the Erev has to work for both days. So, Meliche, what you do is, and this actually is going on everyone, Meliche, the Shliach goes and he brings it Berishin. Before the first, let's say it's Erev Yom Tov, let's say it's Yom Tov is Friday and Shabbos. So you bring it Erev Yom Tov before Shabbos, Berishin, by the first day, and then you wait until it gets dark, until you acquire the Erev. Then the night you take it and you bring it back home because it might get lost, and then you're not going to have Erev by the second day when it's Shabbos. because like we said in the previous mission, if the Eruv is eaten by the first one, so then you can't actually, our mission is going to say this right now, then you can't go ahead and use it anymore. So you go ahead, you bring it back home, and then you come back, Rashani, on the second day, you bring it there before Shabbos, you wait till it gets dark, and then you eat it over there. You can't bring it back home because it's already Shabbos. You could eat it over there, and then you come back, and then it comes out, says the Mishnah, you gain by going there. In other words, by going there, you acquired your ability to go there for the following day. And you also gained the air that you ate it. That's the case if, let's say, Yom Tov is Friday and Shabbos is afterwards. But let's say it's like this year, let's say Shabbos then Yom Tov, then Shabbos and Yom Tov is Sunday, then you can't do that because you're going to have to bring it there on the first day and you can't then take it back because it's Shabbos. So then what you do is the second day, what's called right before Matzah Shabbos, after Shalosh Shudas, you go to see if the Eruv is still there. And then you wait till it's dark, and then if you want to, you could eat it afterwards, but again, you wouldn't be able to take it back home in that case. Now, it says the Mishnah, Nechel B'Rishon, let's say it was eaten by the first day. So Eruvin Daf, it's going to be valid for the first day, because like we said, by Ben Hashmashas, once it was there, it's good, keeping Shahut. But it's not going to be valid for the second day because it's not there, and each day is going to work independently. Which on that, I'm going to Rabbi says to the Chachamim, you obviously admit to me that they're considered as two different sanctities. You're telling me that if it gets eaten after the first day, it's not an for the second day. If it's like you're saying that's considered one sanctity, so then it's like one long day. So that means to say the Ben Hashmashas on the first day, once it was there, like you'll say, should work for both days. And since you're telling me that no, that you have to have it there, the second Ben Hashmashas, obviously they're considered two separate sanctities, then you should be able to make an Eruv in two different directions too. Why are you disagreeing with me in Allah and Mishnah that you're telling me that, oh no, you can't go ahead and split the days and put an Eruv in one direction, another way in a different direction? Because you're telling me that it's Kedusha Achas, you can't switch them. Then why are you telling me over here that if it gets eaten, that's not going to be valid? Why not? Why isn't it going to be valid? If it gets eaten, you should that proves that you're saying that the two are viewed independently, and therefore you have to bring it. Again, if that's the case, we should be able to have a different Eruv for each day. That's what Rabbi Lezer says to the Rabbanan in the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara explains, first of all, when we said in the Mishnah the redundancy, we said, Chamzeh no, the Ruach Achas. This is just a clarification. We said that the Chamzeh has to be in one direction. It says in remind you. So what is that? Obviously, it means L'shnei Yomim. What does the Chum mean to say it has to be one direction? It means for both days, you can't go ahead and divide the days. If that's the case, L'shnei Yomim, then the next sentence, and we already pointed this out when we read the Mishnah of the Chacham, when you say for 2 days, both have to be the same. Mind you, what is that? Obviously, what you're saying is, L'ruach achas, you tell me it has to be one direction. So then the question is, why do you need to say both statements? Hainekamaisa, it's the same thing. It's the first thing you said. One side is the same thing as saying as both days. That says the Gemara, Hachakam the Rabbanan Rabbi Eliezer. You're right. The Rabbanan were just telling a statement to Rabbi Eliezer, and it was part of a proof that they were saying. They were saying, don't you agree by one day? That if, let's say, you made to the west in one direction, or if you didn't make an Eruv at all, that you can't go ahead and make an Eruv for one day, you can't make an Eruv for half a day to the north and half a day to the south. It's wherever your Shabbos residence is. It can't be half over there, half over there. So on that, Rabbi Eliezer said to them, yes, that's true. And that's what he was saying. It's a kashem. Just like you cannot make an Eruv for one day. Half to the south, half to the north. So you cannot make an Eruv for 2 days. One day to the east and one day to the west. Meaning for 2 days also, it's like you made an Eruv for one day. Either you don't make it at all, or you make it the whole day. So l'ruach achas is part of his proof. They were saying on one day is got to be to one direction. And they were saying, just like you agree to me, by one day it's got to be one direction. It can be half a day. So too over here, the 2 days, the Shnei Yomim is the same thing. To which on that, Rabbi Eliezer, he would tell you, no, it's not the same thing. Hasan Kedusha Achas. There it's one sanctity. Achas is Kedushas. There's two sanctities. So it's two different things. You're right. One sanctity, you can't be half here, half there. You can't shtatz in the Bayit Chasnas, But I'm saying, but here it's 2 different days. Why can't I go ahead and do that? Now, actually, only Rabbi Eliezer says to them, don't you agree? Again, these cases sound complicated, they're just trying to bring out a point. Don't you agree that if you made an Eruv with your feet on the first day, which Rashi explains when you made with your feet, the guy giving that bread, there's two ways, we'll see later on this Masaflet to make an Eruv, either by being there or by putting your meal over there. So the guy didn't have bread to send through an agent and make an Eruv. So he went there himself, and he stayed there at the end of 2,000 Amos until Ben Hashmoshes ended, until it became the holy day. And he acquired his Shabbos residence over there, and then he goes and sleeps back at home. So don't you agree that if the person made an Eruv the first day with his feet, that he has to go ahead and make the Eruv the second day? Let's say you have Yom Tov Shabbos, Shabbos Yom Tov. You have to go make the second day with your feet too, and you cannot go out on the second day out of the Tchum by having acquired your Eruv on the first day. Or if, let's say, Nechel Eruvin B'Yom Rishon. Let's say his Eruv was eaten, if let's say he made an Eruv with bread, and his Eruv was eaten on the first day after his Eruv was acquired from him. Don't you agree to me that that you can't go out on the second day through that acquisition of, which is essentially what he said in the Sefer of Mishnah? Don't you agree to me that you can't go out with just the fact that you did the first day? They said yes, which Tais actually points out it's not totally yes. They don't agree, like Eliezer, that you'll become the Ne'iroy. They're in doubt, but they said yes, we agree to this halacha. On that, he says to them, so halai. So then the truth is, Eliezer is telling them that even according to your opinions, Beis Kedusha is saying they're considered as two different sanctities. Again, essentially, we're just repeating here in the Brisa more of an elaboration that we said in the Mishnah. That was the final word. Eliezer says, obviously, you agree that the two sanctities. And therefore, if you had the Eruv for the first day and it was eaten up, it's not going to work anymore for the second day. So why not? If it was one Kedusha, one extended day, you already had it by the first Ben Hashmoshes. Obviously, considering it's 2 different days. Then why can't you make an Eruv one day to the east and one day to the west? They're 2 different sanctities, 2 different days. And that's the Gemara. The Gemara's answer is, Rabbanan Safuke Misafku. Actually, Rabbanan were in doubt. What happens is that the Shabbos and Yom Tov, they weren't sure, is that considered as one sanctity or it's 2 sanctities? And therefore, here they go stringently. In other words, that you cannot go ahead, as they said in the original machlekes in our Mishnah. They said, no, you cannot make an Eruv to 2 different directions because maybe it's one sanctity. But here in the other halacha, they go stringently, and that if it's eaten by the first day, then it's not going to be an Eruv for the second day because maybe it's 2 sanctities. So they weren't there. They weren't sure how to qualify these 2 days if it's considered 1 sanctity, 2 sanctities, and therefore, because of that doubt, they were the mafmer both ways. Now, now they come to explain to Eliezer to disprove him. They tell him, don't you agree? Initially, you're not going to make an Eruv. Let's say a guy did not make an Eruv Ben Hashmoshes of Erev Yom Tov. So let's say Yom Tov is Friday, and then there's Shabbos. Now on Shabbos, he has a simcha, he's got to go 2,000 amos further in that direction. Don't you agree that he cannot make an Eruv on Yom Tov for Shabbos? So he says, yes, that's true. So that's say the Rabbanan Holai. So then the truth is, Kedusha Afasi. Obviously you hold that's 1 sanctity, it's like 1 long day, that you cannot make an Eruv halfway through the days if you didn't make an Eruv Ben Hashmoshes. Because if not, why can't you make an Eruv on Yom Tov for Shabbos? You hold the 2 different days. So why can't you make an Eruv for the second day? And that says the Gemara, no. For Eliezer, he would tell you, Hasam is Mishum Hachana. That's for a different reason. That's because of preparation. Because you're not allowed to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, as we'll explain on the base, and not because it's 1 day. And that's the problem of doing it from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Right? Based on the fact that 2 sanctities, you can do that. You simply can't do it because you're not prepared from Yom Tov to Shabbos, and therefore you cannot make the Eruv. Now the Gemara continues and now brings different opinions regarding this, if it's Kedusha Achas, Shtei Kedushas, if it's a Safek. So talking about Luna Brisa, Eruv Baragla B'Yom Rishon. Someone made an Eruv with his feet on the first day. So Baragla B'Yom Sheni, he has nothing there to remain for the second day. He's got to come back the second day for Shabbos and make an Eruv again. Nechel Eruvin B'Yom Rishon. Let's say the Eruv was eaten already by the first day. He can't come out now and use it as an Eruv for the second day. In other words, as Rashi explains, this is a very important qualification. He's like the people of his city, because it's like a definitive that it's 2 different sanctities, and there's not even a suspicion about being a doubt. I mean, it's not like the Chacham of the Mishnah that we're in doubt. Is it Shtei Kedushas or Kedusha Achas? Divrei Rabbi, this first opinion holds that that's it. it's not considered as an Eruv at all, because it's most definitely two different sanctities, and therefore you're going to be like a regular person in the city. If the Eruv was eaten, if there's no Eruv in the second day, so then there's no halachic element for the second day. Now the second of review them as we did in the days, he says Harei Zachar. This is what's called a donkey driver or a camel driver, where he's stuck somewhere in between. Because, just like the Chama of the Mishnah, maybe it's one sanctity, and if it's one sanctity, it already required for 2 days. If it required for 2 days, so therefore he lost now the 2,000 amos going in the opposite direction. Now the problem is, here he also didn't acquire, because maybe he only has the 2,000 amos that he would have had without the Eruv anyway, because maybe it is 2 sanctities. And therefore his Eruv only acquired for the first day, because the Eruv was eaten up already now before the second day. So maybe on the second day he's supposed to be like the people of the city. So therefore he only has 2,000 amos. Now, Moshe, he has 2,000 amos. But the thing is, you're not going to have more than that, because it will be here, this Eruv, we're not sure if this Eruv is working from the first day or not. So he can't go over here, but neither could he go over here, because maybe the Eruv did work, maybe it didn't work, maybe it's 2 Kedusha, maybe Kedusha Alphas. These 2,000 amos you have Moshe either way, but those 2 he's losing on either direction. A third opinion says the Brisa, Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he says, Eruv Baragl Berishin, if you made an Eruv before the first day of these 2 days of Yom Tov and Shabbos, you don't have to make an Eruv the second day, because he holds it's definitively one Kedusha, it's like one long day. So to Nechle Eruv Berishin, if the Eruv was eaten on the first day, you can go out with it the second day. So we have 3 different opinions that we mentioned. We had one that holds definitively it's 2 Kedushas, one that holds it's a suffix if it's Kedusha, or base Kedushas, and the other one holds definitively as 1 Kedusha. As the Gemara will actually show that the last opinion is actually different. But first Amar Rav, he says, Halacha is Kedal Zikin Malol. Halacha is like these following 4 elders, Valib Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, Dama that he says in the Mishnah, Beis Kedusha saying. We said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer holds 2 different sanctities. Therefore, one day you can make one side, and in the second day you can make it different. Who are these 4 elders? Rabbi Shimon Leil, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Bereka, Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Yisrael Yehuda Stimta, who Stimta means that whoever Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he wrote the Mishnayos, whenever he said a Stam Mishnah, so that was a Stimta. He's a person that Rabbi would say anonymously, Mishnah like him. They could tell me those say no Chad Minai Rabbi Elazar. One of them was Rabbi Elazar. Now whenever you say Rabbi Elazar Stam, without saying who his father is in Shas, Rabbi Elazar meant Shemua. Not like Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, who we just said here is one of the 4 elders. A different one is Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua. And that version takes and uses Rabbi Stimta. Now, so those are the 4 that they rule like Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah, that they're 2 sanctities, and then you can make an Eruv for 2 different days in 2 different directions. On that, the Gemara asks, wait a second. Rabbi Shimon Leil, Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Bereka, we just mentioned them a second ago in that Brisa just before, and we actually learned by them that they say the exact opposite. They just said that it's most definitely considered as one sanctity. So how could you say that it's considered as 2 different sanctities? They said that if the Eruv was eaten before the first day, you could still go on the second day. How could you go? It's obviously 1 Kedusha. How could you quote them saying it's 2 Kedushas? And that says the Gemara, you're right. April, you have to switch it around. That Brisa, it wasn't them. They actually were saying that not that it's going to be valid, that it's not going to be valid, because it's 2 different. It's 2 different sanctities, and the fact that it was the first day is not going to help you with the second day. So if that's the case, that you just switched it around, Haini Rebbe. So then they're saying exactly like that of Rebbe, which Rebbe was the first opinion in the Brisa. Again, we had 3 opinions in the Brisa. We had Rebbe who said there was 2 Kedushas. We had the Chachamim who Chama Gamel, not sure. And then we had Rabbi Shmuel ben Yochanan Bereka who said that it's going to be considered as definitively 1 Kedusha. So we understand why there's 3 opinions. Now you just switched it around. You said they hold that no, it's not considered as 1, it's considered as 2. So that's like Rebbe. So the Gemara ain't going to say, yeah, it shouldn't say as if it's a different opinion. It also says that if your Eruv was eaten by the first day, you cannot go on the second day, because it is going to be as 2 different sanctifications. So then the Gemara asks, wait a second. If you're telling me that there was 4 elders that say like Rabbi Eliezer, that the law is going to be that it's 2 different sanctities, so then V'lech Shanami Rebbe. Why don't you count also Rebbe, who he was we counted before that he says two different sanctities. He was the first opinion we thought there were three opinions, ended up being two opinions, that he said that's two sanctities. So why don't you say he's one of the four that's like a Eliezer? Says the Gemara, no, Rebbe only taught this teaching, but he doesn't hold like that. In other words, he was only saying that opinion according to Rabbi Eliezer, but he himself doesn't hold like it. So it's not like he's saying like Rabbi Eliezer. So says the Gemara, says in Rabban Nami. So those other rabbis, and that of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Shmuel, also maybe maybe they also only taught it and they didn't hold of it. Although you're saying v'chein, you're amending it and say that they say like Rebbe, maybe they're exactly like Rebbe, that they're only teaching but they don't hold of it. How can you say there's four elders that they rule like Rabbi Eliezer? Says the Gemara, you're right. Rav had a tradition from his teacher that these four elders they held like Rabbi Eliezer, but Rebbe, although he seems to be saying that halacha, he taught it, but he doesn't hold like it. He was only saying this what Rabbi Eliezer holds, but he himself doesn't hold like this. Now, says the Gemara, this teaching from before was from that of Rav. And that says the Gemara, Kinach nafshi Rav Huna, when Rav Huna passed away, I am Rav Chizda lememi de Rav de Rav. So Rav Chizda wanted to go and pose a contradiction of Rav on Rav. Mi Amar Rav Allah Kedal Zkain Rabbi Eliezer. Did really Rav say this? That Allah is like these four elders, which they're all going like Rabbi Eliezer, that it's going to be considered Damash Kedusha, saying that the 2 different days of Yom Tov and Shabbos are considered 2 different sanctities. And Rav's ruling like that. The problem is, but we learn Shabbos and Yom Tov, which is this exact case. It's Rav who's saying this. No, if an egg is born, is laid on one day, Asura Bezeh, it's Asur on the other day. Why would it be Asur on the other day? Obviously, it's considered one sanctity. If it's 2 sanctities, they're considered 2 different days. So you wouldn't have a problem about Noilid on the other day. Obviously, it's 1 sanctity. So that contradicts Rav. Rav said that Allah was like these 4 elders according to Rabbi Eliezer, that's 2 sanctities. That I'm a Rabbi says that no, Hasam Mishum Hachana. That's a different reason. That's like we mentioned Amid Aleph. That's because of preparation. The time of in the Brisa, it says in the pasuk in Shemai, it's going to be on the 6th day. And they're going to prepare, which Tracy explains. When it says Hashishi, this 6th day means the verified one, which is a weekday, which tells us that Chol Meichel and Shabbos. From a weekday you can prepare for Shabbos. I'm a Chol Meichel and Yom Tov, and from a weekday prepare for Yom Tov. Ve'ein Yom Tov Meichel and Shabbos, but Yom Tov cannot prepare for Shabbos. Ve'ein Shabbos Meichel and Yom Tov, and Shabbos cannot prepare for Yom Tov. And that's why it's a problem when the egg is laid on Yom Tov, that you can't use it on Shabbos. Not because it's 1 sanctity. Truth is, Rav rules that like Rabbi Eliezer, like those 4 elders, that it's 2 sanctities. So then why can't you use the egg that's laid on Yom Tov for Shabbos? Is simply because what's known as Achana de Rabba's explanation over here, which is because it's considered preparation. You're not prepared from Yom Tov to Shabbos as we learned here in the pasuk. And that Abaya answers, Elahad is not. It says that what do you do with the halacha of Mishnah? A Mishnah said, Ketzir Oisa, that the Mishnah said, so what do you do to make an Eruv on both days? So on that the Mishnah said, what you do is you bring it on the first day, you wait till it gets dark, the night later, then you can take it back home. We're talking about that Yom Tov is Friday and then the Shabbos. Take it back home, then you bring it back, Sheni, right before the 2nd day before Shabbos, you wait till it gets dark, you eat it, and then you could go back home. And that the question is, but you're preparing over here, Yom Tov Shabbos, by making the Eruv, you're preparing from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So how are you allowed to go ahead and do that? You told me not prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Here you're preparing by making the Eruv. And that Amalei Rabbi says, he says, no. Misabra, do you think Seif Hayoyim, that it's the end of the day of Erev Shabbos that's kind of Erev, that acquires the Erev, which that would be Yom Tov preparing for Shabbos? No. Tchilas Hayoyim kind of Erev. The beginning of the day of Shabbos that acquires the Erev, the Shabbos Mechina La'atzma. Shabbos is preparing for itself, and therefore you're not doing any preparation. But then the Gemara is telling me out if that's the case, Ya'arvu Belagin. We should make an Eruv with the pitcher. If you recall, we mentioned on Daf Yomi previously in the parak, we spoke about a pitcher that's a full yom. That pitcher was tamei. You immersed it that day. It didn't have sundown yet. You filled it up from a barrel that had meiser that was untight. You didn't take the trumas meiser on that meiser. You said, I want what's in this pitcher to be trumas meiser on what's from what I took from that barrel, and I want it to take effect when it gets dark. So he said, it's valid because although it's tummy and it would be problematic for Trumas Meiser, but the Trumas Meiser only when it gets dark. When it gets dark already had Harav Shemesh, so it's going to be valid. But we said, if you said that I want this to be an Eruv, you didn't say anything. So obviously you see Seif Hayim kind of Eruv. you see that the Erev takes effect the end of Erev Shabbos, and that's why it's not going to be valid, because at that point it was still Tevel. Because if you said Tchila Zayim Kaina, so what's wrong? That should be a valid Erev. By the time Shabbos is starting, it's already valid Truma that's not becoming Tummy, because it's already Shabbos, already had sundown. So then why can't you make an Erev with that picture, as we said in the Mishnah, Masechtas Tvul Yain? And that's the Gemara, and we said this there also on Daf Yomi. You're right, technically when the Erev is taking effect, it is a valid Erev. But you needed to have been a meal that could have been eaten from before Shabbos. That it wasn't, because like we explained, it only becomes an effective meal when Shabbos actually starts. But then the Gemara continues asking on this. Regarding this concept that we're saying over here regarding Hachana, what's called Hachana the Rab, the Gemara is from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said, he says, Yom Tov Samach L'Shabbos. Regarding Yom Tov that's near Shabbos, like we said, whether it's right before Shabbos on Friday, whether right after Shabbos on Sunday, the halacha is Ma'ariv Adam Shnei Eruvin. A person could go ahead and make 2 Erevs. Now, the assumption is that, like Rabbi Eliezer seems to say, that you can make an Erev 2,000 amas to the east, and then you could go the opposite direction the next day, 2,000 amas to the west. Now, when the Erev requires you on the first day to the east, you can go totally 4,000 amas to the east, but you can't go even one step to the other direction, because from the place of your Erev, so let's say here, this is day 1, so you put in your Erev day 1 over here, so you have 2,000 amas over here. You can go another 2,000 amas over here. You can't go even 1 amma this direction, because this is really where you're spending Shabbos. This is your 2,000 amas, and this is considered as dollar amas because it's a city, but you can't go even 1 step this way. And so to the other day, on the second day, you could go here, 2,000 is where you're starting from. You go another 2,000 here, so you can go 2,000, 2,000, but you can't take even 1 step over here. And again, but you see you can go, it's part of that because it's considered like dollar amas. But more than that, you can't go. So the question the Gemara is asking is, how can your Erev require for the second day to the west, but you need it to be a meal that you could have eaten when it was still that day, but like you can't, because if you wanted to go on day 1 and get to Erev on day 2, where you're making the day 2, on Erev that second day, you can't go here, because you can't even go 1 step over here. So then why are you telling me, according to Rabbi Eliezer, yeah, I understand the space Kedushas. I understand you can have 2 different Eruvin. Problem is, but it's not a Suda Rumah Ba'yan, because you can't access it from before the second day, because you made an Erev the other direction. So how's that a valid Erev? So that the Gemara says, no. Misabir, do you really think the Manachli B'Seif Alpayim Am Lekan? Do you think Rabbi Eliezer case was that you put at the end of 2,000 amas on this direction? B'Seif Alpayim Am Lekan, you put at the end of 2,000 amas in the other direction, where then you would not be able to access it at all on the first day? No, that's not the case. The Manach Li B'Seif Elef Am Lekan. He put it at the end of 1,000 amas in this direction. B'Seif Elef Am Lekan at the end of 1,000 amas in the other direction. Because as Rashi explains, the guy didn't need to go on the first day or the second day. He only needed to go from his city 3,000 amas. Now 2,000 amas you get. So he really needed another 1,000 amas. So he put his Erev at the end of the city 1,000 amas. So therefore on the first day, although he's acquiring Erev over here to the east, he can go to his Erev on the west, because here he has 1,000 amas, and the whole city is considered like dollar amas, as we'll learn later on this Masechta, so it's not really counted. So here from this Erev to this Erev, he could go. It's 2,000 amas. So therefore, that's why it's considered Suda Haruma Bayan. You actually could access. That was the case what Leza was talking about. Now the Gemara goes back to ask on this concept that we said that, so you're not allowed to make hachana from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Therefore, let's say we said an egg is born on one day, you can't use it the second day, not because of, like we said, of Kedusha Achas, we said simply because you can't, it's considered Isra V'achana. So that the Gemara asks, Allah Rebbe read this, if you read this says, Erev Baraglav Yom Rishon, if you made an Erev with your legs on the first day, Ma'ar Baraglav Yom Sheni, so, okay, you have to make an Erev the second day, because the first day doesn't help for the second day. Erev B'Pasli Yom Rishon, let's say you make Erev with the bread on the first day. So again, Ma'ar B'Pasli Yom Sheni, you have to go ahead and make an Erev with the bread on the second day, which later on the Gemara is going to explain, it's with that same bread itself. But one thing the Gemara asks is how come Meichin, the person's preparing, when he's making Erev with his legs the second day, Yom Tov l'Shabbos, from Yom Tov to Shabbos. In other words, as Rashi explains, Rashi understands that, I understand the second day, that you're making Erev with the same bread that would make sense, because we already explained. We said Tchilas Hayayim is kind of the Erev. We said that really, when does it take effect, the Erev? Is with the bread. And that happens, when does it happen? When Shabbos starts. So therefore, you're not really doing anything. The bread, you don't have to say anything. It happens by itself. And it's happening on Shabbos. So it's not Yom Tov Meichel Shabbos, it's Shabbos Meichel Atzma. When you make an Erev with your legs, so the assumption of the Gemara is that you need to say something. That my shvisa is in my place. Now the thing is, you don't know when Shabbos is actually starting. You don't know the exact time. So you would have to say it when it's still before Shabbos starts. So it comes up with you're saying, you're preparing from Yom Tov to Shabbos. So how are you allowed to go ahead and make an Erev Baraglov, B'Sheni, which is Yom Tov is Friday, and then the Shabbos? That means you got to come there a little bit before Shabbos. You have to say Shvisas Lemkaimi. You're preparing for Yom Tov to Shabbos with your statement. And then he said to him, Misa with the Azal Amamidi, do you think that he's actually coming and saying anything? No, the Azal B'Shasik B'Yasif. The lafaz actually is that he could just come and be silent and he could just sit there. You don't have to actually say anything if it's not a violation of Hacham. Which the Gemara says, come on, who's that like? Says the Gemara, it's Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. It's like Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. Which the Gemara brings later on, that someone who's sleeping, he acquires his shlisa, although that it's just like an ownerless object, where a person is not going ahead and acquiring a shlisa for him because he's sleeping. And that says Rabbi Yochanan Domar, he says Chetzi Hefker kind of shlisa, an ownerless object acquires the Shabbos residence, and therefore he's going to have 2,000 amas. And therefore also over here that it's like when you didn't say anything, it doesn't make a difference. That's what it's called. Like it's like you're sleeping, and when you're sleeping, you also get a makom shvisa. So it's over here, but just being over there, it's going to be a makom shvisa. So seemingly says Gemara, it's like a Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. And says Gemara, no, I feel the you could even say it's like going like Rabban. Where do we find that they disagree with him? It's regarding El B'Yash, only when you're sleeping. The Lei Matzi Amar, where you can't say. If you can't say, so then you're not acquiring any shvisa. A B'Neir, and this is a concept we find throughout Shas. But if you're awake, the B'Yalim, if you wanted to say Matziyam, you could say it. So even if you're not saying it, come on, it's like you did say it. So yeah, it could even be like Rabbanan, although when you're sleeping, or if you're a hefker object, if you're not going ahead and acquiring, you don't get in Makom Shvisa, only get Dal Lamas, you don't get 2,000 Lamas. Here they would agree, because since technically you could go ahead, so therefore it's like as if you did say it, so you're not really preparing, because you didn't say anything. At the same time, it will acquire for you a Makom Shvisa. Now, the last part of the Gemara says, Amali Rabbi Bar Chanan Abai. He says, he asked on Rabbi's halacha regarding the prohibition about preparing. He says, if the master, meaning referring to his Rebbe Rabbah, who he had explained this whole Gemara's discussion, to say why we're talking about if you didn't say anything, it's going to be permitted. Meaning, he said, I'll make preparations, but he said that, okay, even though you went there from before Shabbos, it's not a problem, you didn't prepare anything because you didn't say anything. And that, Rabbi Chanan said to Abaye, if Rabbah would have heard Hadatanya, this is what the price that says, Lo Yahalachal, the person not supposed to go on Shabbos, L'Seif Sedei to the end of his field, they might to see what it needs after Shabbos. He's looking around this field, oh, what do I need to do? Mm-hmm. He didn't say anything, he's just walking around looking what it needs. Or K'yetzabai, similarly, the person's not supposed to stroll on Shabbos or Yom Tov, like when it's getting dark, for the end of Shabbos or Yom Tov, Al Pesach Medina, by the entryway of the opening of the city, K'desha comes to Merchatz Miyad, that he could go right away into the bathhouse right after Shabbos is over, so he could be there right away. So you're not allowed to do either one of these things. So you see, even though the person's just walking and he's not saying anything, it's going to be forbidden. So by an Eruv, that if by speaking it would be a problem, because the Rabbah said it's Achana the Rabbah, so being silent also would be the same Isser, just by going over there. So therefore Hadabe he would have retracted. To which Abaye says, well, it's not true. Shmile, he actually did hear this, and he did not retract. And what's the difference? Hashem over there in the Brisa, that it's forbidden just to walk, it's Muchamilsa. It's obviously, what are you doing in your field? Obviously, you're going to check out what it needs. And the Torah tells you, you're not supposed to engage in your own business activities. And so too, when you go into the entry of the city, what are you doing over there? Everyone knows the bathhouse was right outside the city. It's obvious what you're doing it for, therefore just walking is forbidden. But over here, when you're going out of the city until the Tchum, Lav Mocha Milsehi, it's not obvious that you're going to make an Eruv for the following day. And people wouldn't entertain that if it's not a problem. You know why? So the Gemara says very interestingly. If he's a Talmid Chacham, we say that he's learning, told him. Meaning he's thinking of learning, and he doesn't realize where he's going. He's just walking and walking and walking. Before he knows, he's already by the tchum. And people are going to say, oh, he probably just was engaged in learning. So if he's an ignoramus who doesn't learn, they're going to say that his donkey got lost, and he's just checking for his donkey is. And therefore, because on Shabbos you're allowed to go ahead and bring your donkey back if it's within the tchum back to your house. And therefore, people are not going to suspect. But regarding something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, like going to the bathhouse or checking out your field, then you're not allowed to even be there, and therefore that's why it's not difficult on Rabbah. He knew this brisa, but still, he didn't retract, because one is obvious that you're doing it, and therefore, even if you don't say anything, it's forbidden. The other one was not obvious, and therefore, it was permitted for him to do that without saying anything. Some things we discussed in today's Daf Yomi, Daf Lamed Ches, we brought a machlekes. We spoke about if Yom Tov is near Shabbos again, whether before Shabbos, after Shabbos, let's say like this year, Shabbos and then Sunday. So I said that we had machlekes if it's two kedushas, and therefore you can make two different Eruvin. That was the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Or is it one kedusha, which really the Gemara says it's actually a suffix, but they go stringently, where no, it's going to be considered as one kedusha, therefore you cannot make two Eruvin. It would have to be one direction or none. Now, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that you could not make an Eruv initially from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Wait a second, doesn't that sound like it's one kedusha? No, it's not a proof that's one kedusha. Rather, it's a problem about hacham. Now prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, but they will have two different Eruv, and you just have to do it from before Yom Tov. Then the Gemara were three opinions, at least initially, if it's definitively one kedusha, which ultimately the Gemara says that no, either a suffix or actually. It's actually not that of a suffix, it's actually that of, as the Gemara said, that holds like Rebbe, which is like the next opinion, of two kedushas. Rebbe said that it's for sure, definitively two kedushas, and therefore it was eaten on the first day, you actually like kibbenei iroi, and then we had an opinion that was, no, it's a suffix, and that would be chamar gamol, I'm not sure if it's for both days or for one, therefore let's say it was eaten, you'd be somewhere in the middle. Now Rav said, the halacha is like 4 elders, like according to Eliezer, that says it's considered two different kedusha, make an Eruv for 2 7 days. And why didn't he count Rebbe? Because Rebbe said it, but he didn't hold like that. The question is, the Gemara says, but Rav said that Shabbos and Yom Tov, if it's nol de bezeh, it's asr bezeh. What do you mean? Why is it asr? Two different kedushas. It should be a problem only on the first day, not the second day. And that says the Gemara. That's the concept of Achamad the Rabbah. You can't prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbos, and here the egg that's being born is a noilid on Yom Tov is being prepared for Shabbos, and that's what's going to be asr on Shabbos. And you can't make an Eruv. The same thing is, like I said, from Yom Tov, if it's Erev Shabbos to Shabbos, that's the same concept that we said of Hacham. Now, the Gemara brought the Eruv itself is acquired on Tchilas Hayom of Shabbos, and that's what we said, that that's not considered a problem about Hacham. In other words, this was in general, Rabbi explaining, every time you have Yom Tov the first day, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that you can go ahead, we said like the halacha of Rabbi Yehuda, we said that Ma'ar Baraglan B'Sheni, so Hay Ma'ar Barag, how do you make an Eruv the second day? So he said that's not a problem because let's say in the case of Pas, by bread, even if it's the same bread, it's not considered preparing because it's the beginning of the day. It's Shabbos, that's Meichel Ha'atzma, it's not Yom Tov preparing for Shabbos. Then why was it that the log in the pictures from Daf Lamed Vav, from the Mishnah Masechet Yom, why is it not effective? Why? It takes effect when Shabbos, it's going to be Trumat Tahira, Trumas Meiser, when Shabbos starts, because for a different reason. It's not a Sudar Rima Ba'ayyan. It has to be fit from before Shabbos, and that's not the case. So then, wait a second, why in our Mishnah does it help when Rabbi Eliezer says that you have 2 days, one to the east, one to the west? Wait a second, on the first day, you couldn't access the one on the other direction, so it's not going to be Sudar Rima Ba'ayyan. It's not true. He only wanted 1,000 amas in each direction. And therefore, you're going to be able to get 2,000 amas from one Eruv to the other Eruv, and therefore it is accessible. Now, that was said that's regarding the bread. What's with the feet? So, the feet, the Gemara actually says, no, you don't have to say anything. So therefore, you're not saying, Shvasas b'mkaymein, you would have to do it a little bit before Shabbos, you don't know when they're actually starting, you don't have to say anything. And the Gemara even says it doesn't have to be like a Eruvin Nuri, who he's the one who says that, we'll see later on this Masechta, Chefzi Hefka, which is like when a person's sleeping, he's kind of shvisa. Because you could say in our case, where the guy is awake, if he wanted to say he could, and therefore it's considered as if he did say, and therefore everyone would agree that it's going to be a valid erev. Now, it's not difficult on Rabbah, this that we say, that it's forbidden even to just go, like we find, and if you feel, or the Pesach of Medina, so how's it help you telling me that you can make an erev? You know, make hachana, but it's not a problem, it's not saying anything, but you see that hachana is a problem even by just walking somewhere. No, there it's obvious what you're doing over there. What are you doing in your field? What are you doing there at the Pesach of Medina? Here, it's not obvious where the guy's going to the end of the Tchum to make an erev for the following day. We have to our Braglov, because of his Talmud Chacham, people can say, hey, he got lost in his learning. Now, if people say he lost his donkey, and therefore people it's not going to be obvious, and then it's going to be permitted, and if it's not difficult on Rabbah, I think it's at any time. Those things.